We have two big middleweight fights on our main card, Matt, and I'm really looking forward to our first because we have Darren the Dentist Stewart taking on Coconut Bombz, Maki Pitolo. These are guys that will throw bombs and they will grapple, but they don't like it. They'd sooner throw those bombs. So I'm excited about it for a lot of different reasons. You look at Maki Pitolo's last fight against Charles Byrd, and I know Charles Byrd retired after. Pitolo looked great. He really did. He looked accurate. He looked good. He looked dialed in. In his UFC debut against Callum Potter, it wasn't a great one. I know it was down under. Callum Potter was kind of the hometown guy. He picked up the win. It wasn't Pitolo. Again, it was just a weird fight. But to get into the UFC and on his way up, he was knocking people out. He was getting submissions. He beat Justin Sumter on Contender Series, and he looked amazing. And we saw a flash of that in his last fight against Charles Byrd. Now, for Darren Stewart, he's a known commodity in the UFC. And if you want to go back and look at his last 5 fights, we're talking Charles Byrd, and he knocked him out. Then he lost to Edmund Shabazian in a fight that was really close. He lost by split. Matt, if you say that he beat Shabazian, you're one of very few. And listen, say what you want to get about Edmund Shabazian. The guy's 22 years old, and he just lost to a good fighter in Derek Brunson. So don't be too hard on the kid. Then for Darren Stewart, he beats Bavon Lewis. He beats Deron Wynn, and that was an interesting fight because there was a lot of back and forth and bad blood. Darren Stewart gets a win there. Then he lost to Bartosz Fabinski. Matt, first question, was that a Cage Warriors fight or was it a UFC fight?
I don't know. Dana White says, I'll never co-promote. And then the one time he has to co-promote, he's like, yeah, sure, you can have this fight for Cage Warriors. So we can say it was for Cage Warriors, but it was 2 UFC guys.
To me, they didn't wear UFC trunks. They didn't wear UFC gloves. So, and it was a Cage Warriors main event. So to me, it was Cage Warriors fight. And I asked that because it's a divisive subject on not just Twitter, but in the YouTube comments. So I wanted to address it there. But that fight was supposed to take place UFC London. Those two guys stuck around. That was as everything in the world was starting to close. And if you looked at it, UFC was on a Saturday. Cage Warriors was on the Friday. They were both in London, and then they moved it to Manchester, if I'm not mistaken. So those guys fight, and Bartosz Fabinski, I believe, was the underdog. Now I sound totally unprepared, but I'm quite sure he was the underdog. We made a prediction video about it. We did the entire Cage Warriors card. It was a lot of fun because it was the only thing on TV, as it looked like the world was going to end. And Bartosz Fabinski looked like a world beater. He took Darren Stewart down over and over again and landed on him and looked like a great fighter that we thought Bartosz Fabinski could be, but he was really inconsistent and hadn't fought a lot. So for Darren Stewart, you're coming off a fight where you didn't look like yourself. You get drawn out. It wasn't a good one for Stewart. For Pitolo, renaissance performance against Charles Byrd. You made the guy retire. This is where it gets weird. I'm surprised that the odds are where they're at. Darren Stewart, a favorite, -185. You got Pitolo +150. Over on Tapology, the votes are split and they're close. 56% of 672 voters going with Stewart. 57% saying he's going to win by knockout. On the flip side, the 44% that are going with Pitolo. 66 saying he's going to win by knockout. I think this is an awesome fight. I've kind of tried to set it up in every single facet. What do you make of this one?
This is one of the few fights on the card that I think we both guarantee is not going to make it to the judges' scorecard just because both guys just natural, finishing ability, but also just their styles. I mean, Darren Stewart, unless you do give him the threat of a takedown, when he's in a straight stand-up fight, he normally runs people over. And I know Eric Spicely, that's the name I'm going to bring up. He's no longer in the UFC as of today, but in that fight, Darren Stewart was able to just walk forward and have no threat of either A, incoming power, or B, the takedown. And we really saw what Darren Stewart was able to do at his peak. And again, it's against Eric Spicely, so you can't take that much from it. But Darren Stewart just kind of ran over him. It wasn't very close.
Darren Stewart, at one point in his career, everybody thought, well, this is going to be it for Darren Stewart. He's going to get cut. Remember that fight that he had? And I can liken this one. Remember the Julian Marquez fight? I mean, we have a cool nickname in Coconut Bombz, the Cuban Missile Crisis. Remember how that one went? I see that one similar to this one.
Exactly, and that was a phenomenal fight until he got finished, and it was a fight where he exerted all of this energy going for the finish, and then he got tired and gassed out. He's one of these guys who carries around a tremendous amount of muscle for the weight class, and you're always going to be susceptible to getting gassed, unless you're Paulo Costa for some unknown reasons, who doesn't really seem to get tired, even though he's made of 99% muscle. But Darren Stewart is going to outpower the majority of the guys we face, but Maki Pitolo is cut for that same cloth. Like you mentioned, they can grapple, both guys can. They just don't really choose to because they are such heavy-handed strikers. And heavy-handed is a really great term because neither guy's all that kick-heavy. Two more boxing-oriented guys. Stewart, in particular, he doesn't even really throw leg kicks. He just throws, goes out there, throws hooks. The thing that I'm a little worried about is we haven't seen Darren Stewart really unleash a lot of his potential as of late. The Bevon Lewis fight's one of the worst fights I've ever seen in my life. He was slightly busier, and it just went to a decision. It was both guys are pretty, they're very hesitant because they're worried about the other guy's power, and it just ended up being a pretty bad fight. And his last fight against Verbinski, he could just never pull the trigger because every time he would, he'd get taken down immediately. So for Darren Stewart, it's a really odd point in his career because we're going to see. This is a very good stylistic matchup for him. It's a guy who's probably not going to take him down. It's a guy who's going to stand and strike with him. And if, his past career is anything to go by, he should have some good success in this fight. With Pitolo, I just think he has the higher ceiling out of the two. And I think when push comes to shove, he might not have as much power at the beginning of this fight. But if he can sort of outlast a couple of those storms from Darren Stewart, I think Pitolo is going to slowly be able to pick him apart as the fight goes on and maybe even get it finished by the third round.
I mean, I like that. You turn withstand and outlast into with last. And I think that's a new Fight Night Picks term that we should use moving forward. You're Sir Charles and I'll be Kenny the Jet Smith. But I'm really looking forward to this one because, like you said, the styles make fights. And I know that's an overused term in MMA and in all of combat sports. But this is one of those fights where you're probably not going to get a takedown. If you do, it's going to be from Stewart. You're going to get two guys that are just going to go at it on the feet unless they get hesitant like that Bevon Lewis fight. And there's a lot of signs that are pointing towards Darren Stewart. I just think if you don't respect the power of Maki Pitolo early on, that's going to be a problem. And I see a path to victory quite easily for Pitolo. I mean, like I said, you saw the flashes of brilliance coming up on the regional scene. He beats Sumter, looks amazing on Contender Series, and then lays an egg against Callum Potter. So Callum Potter, really, really wily vet at that point in his career, and just kind of goes to the well and gets a win. You look at it for Pitolo, I think all signs point to Coconut Bombz, and I think Hawaii's going to pick up a win here. Are you agreeing with me?
I do. I think the underdog's going to be able to get it done because you look at both guys, they have very similar skill sets. But Pitolo, he's got not a lot of guys can go power for power with Darren Stewart, but I think Pitolo is one of the few who can. And I think cardio-wise, it definitely favors Pitolo as the fight goes on because Darren Stewart, again, he's got that big push, and then there's not that much that comes behind it, especially because if it's grappling heavy, if they are holding each other up against the cage, especially, have a little bit of that work in there, I think it's going to slowly drain that power and that gas tank of Darren Stewart, and eventually it'll probably get finished.
Matt, I'm really looking forward to this one. We're both going with the underdog in Maki Pitolo to pick up the win. You're not going to want to miss the rest of our predictions for the video. We got 12 of them, including extended look at our main event between Derek Lewis and Alexei Oleinik. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, Matt. And as we always say, let's get into it.